My family promised me $25K for my wedding, but when I discovered they spent it all on my sister and asked me to postpone my marriage to not hurt her feelings, I cut them off and got married without inviting them. I'm 34 years old. I work in digital marketing, and 3 weeks ago I married the love of my life in a beautiful ceremony surrounded by friends and Matthew's family, my now husband. My parents weren't there. My sister wasn't either. And no, it wasn't because they got sick or had some emergency. It was because basically I decided I didn't want them there after everything that happened. I know it sounds horrible when I say it like that. Like, who gets married without inviting their own parents? But the truth is that what they did to me was so brutal, so unnecessary, that there came a point where I simply had to choose between my own sanity and maintaining a relationship with them, and I chose my sanity. I guess I should start from the beginning. When Matthew and I got engaged like a year and a half ago, we'd been together for 5 years, and honestly, it was the happiest day of my life up to that point. Matthew planned everything perfectly. Took me to the place where we had our first date, got down on one knee, the whole thing. Obviously, I told my parents right away. I was super excited, and they seemed happy too. My mom, Barbara, even cried a little when I told her, and my dad, Richard, hugged me and said Matthew was a good guy, that he liked him. That meant a lot to me because, you always want your parents to approve of your partner. The thing is that Matthew and I are pretty financially independent. He's a software engineer and does really well, and I also have a decent job, so we never expected or asked for financial help with anything. But it turns out that when we told them about the wedding, my parents insisted they wanted to contribute. My dad owns a bookstore. Well, they both run it together, and they retired like 3 years ago, but still keep the business because they love it. They do well. They're not millionaires, but they don't lack anything either. You know what I mean? And my mom was very specific. She told me, Rebecca, we want to give you $25,000 for the wedding. Your father and I already talked about it, and it's something we really want to do for you. I was like, seriously? Because $25,000 is no small thing, and even though Matthew and I could pay for our wedding, that amount meant we could do something bigger, nicer, without having to worry so much about the budget. I told them it wasn't necessary, like 3 times, that we were fine, but they insisted so much that we finally accepted. My mom even told me, "It's your only wedding, daughter, I hope so," she said, laughing. "Let us do this for you." And well, yeah, we started planning the wedding with that money in mind. Now I have to talk about my sister Stephanie because, obviously, she's a huge part of this whole mess. Stephanie is 36 years old. She's 2 years older than me, and we've always had a somewhat complicated relationship. Not that we hated each other or anything, but we were never super close either. She got married like 7 years ago to a guy named, well, his name doesn't matter. The point is that from the beginning I felt that marriage wasn't going to work. He was kind of controlling. Always had to be the center of attention, and Stephanie changed a lot when she was with him. She became more distant, more defensive, and basically stopped talking to me as much. What I didn't know was that things in her marriage were really bad. Like a month after Matthew and I got engaged, Stephanie announced she was getting divorced. And it wasn't an amicable divorce like, we just don't work anymore but let's stay friends. No, it was a super ugly divorce where he had apparently hidden money from her, had put properties in his mother's name, a complete legal mess. Stephanie quit her job as a manager at a department store like a year before the divorce. He never understood why. She said she was finding herself, or something like that. So financially, she was in bad shape, and she ended up moving in with my parents. At first, I tried to be understanding, obviously. She's my sister. She was going through something difficult, and even though we weren't best friends in the world, I'm not a monster. I called her several times, offered help, told her if she needed to talk, I was there. But Stephanie basically ignored me. She'd answer in monosyllables, cancel plans on me, and when I went to visit my parents and saw her there, she barely talked to me. She was all day in pajamas watching Netflix in the guest room, and my parents would bring her food and everything. It was kind of weird, but, well, difficult divorce. I understood it. Meanwhile, Matthew and I kept planning the wedding. We found a beautiful venue, hired an amazing photographer. My mom went with me to try on dresses, and it was super sweet that day. She cried when I came out in the dress I finally chose. Everything was going perfectly. We sent out invitations 8 months in advance, booked everything, made the corresponding deposits. My parents hadn't transferred the $25,000 yet, but I wasn't worried. They had told me they'd give it to me when we were closer to the date to help with final payments. And then, like 3 months before the wedding, I started noticing my parents were acting weird with me. When I called them, conversations were short. When I told them things about the wedding, they'd stay quiet or change the subject. My mom stopped asking me about the plans, which was super strange because before she was super involved. I thought, well, maybe they're stressed with Stephanie living there. Divorce is a long process. It must be exhausting for them too. But it turns out, it wasn't just that. 3 weeks before writing this post, so like 2 months before the wedding, my parents asked me to come to their house because they needed to talk to me about something important. I went thinking maybe they wanted to help me with some last-minute detail or, I don't know. I never imagined what was coming. I arrived and they were both sitting in the living room with funeral-type faces, and Stephanie was upstairs in her room. I could hear the TV on. My dad got straight to the point. "Rebecca," he said, "we need to talk about the wedding money." And I was like, "Yeah, tell me, when are you going to transfer it?" Because I already needed to make some final payments. And he stayed quiet for a moment and then said, "The thing is, we're not going to be able to give you that money anymore." Just like that. Just like that. I literally stood there with my mouth open, waiting for them to say it was a joke or something. But no. My mom started explaining that they'd had unexpected expenses, that Stephanie's situation was more complicated than they thought, that the divorce lawyer was very expensive. "Wait," I said to them, "are you telling me you spent my wedding money on Stephanie's lawyer?" And my dad got kind of defensive and said it wasn't my money, that they had never given me anything yet, that technically, it was still their money. Which, yes, technically he was right, but after a year of planning a whole wedding counting on that money that they offered, that they insisted on giving me, it was basically the same thing. My mom was trying to soften things by saying I should understand, that Stephanie really needed a good lawyer because her ex was playing dirty, that it was a difficult family situation. I was starting to process all this, like trying not to explode right there, when my mom dropped the final bomb. She said, "Also, honey, we've been thinking that maybe it would be better if you postpone the wedding a few months. Stephanie is very emotionally fragile right now. A divorce is devastating, and we feel it would be insensitive of you to get married right now when your sister is suffering so much. That I needed to understand the timing wasn't right, that Stephanie needed family support, that I was being selfish by not considering her feelings." And that's when I exploded. I told them they were completely crazy if I thought I was going to postpone my wedding because it was more convenient for Stephanie. That I'd been planning this for a year, that everything was already paid for. Well, most of it, with our money, Matthew's and mine, that we had 150 confirmed guests, that what they were asking me was absolutely ridiculous. My dad got angry and started yelling that I'd always been the selfish daughter, that I only thought about myself, that Stephanie was going through a crisis and I couldn't take 2 minutes to be supportive. The argument was horrible, one of the worst I've had in my life. I was crying, they were yelling, and at one point, Stephanie came downstairs and said she didn't need my pity, that she hadn't asked me to postpone anything, but that yes, it hurt her that I was so happy while her life was falling apart. I told her I was very sorry about her divorce. I really was, but that didn't mean I had to pause my life. She stormed back to her room, and my parents told me to leave their house if I wasn't going to be reasonable. I left crying, called Matthew on the way, and told him everything. He was furious, like I'd never seen him so angry. He told me we'd get married anyway, that he'd pay for whatever was left, that my parents had crossed a line there was no coming back from. And he was right. We got home and sat down to do the math, see what we still needed to pay. It turned out we could cover everything without problem. We'd have to adjust some things, but nothing drastic. We decided right there that we were going to go ahead with the wedding just as it was planned. I didn't talk to my parents for 2 weeks after that fight. Nothing. Zero communication. Matthew and I focused on finishing, organizing everything, and honestly, those 2 weeks were emotionally exhausting. I'd go from being furious to being sad, to feeling guilty, to being furious again. Matthew was incredible during all that time. He supported me at every moment, never pressured me to fix things with my family, if I didn't want to. And then came the time to send out the final invitations. You know, the ones that had all the specific details of the day, the schedules, the dress code, all that. Matthew and I sat down one night with the guest list and got to my parents' and Stephanie's names. We stared at the list for a long while without saying anything. Finally, Matthew asked me what I wanted to do, and I honestly didn't know. Part of me thought they were my parents, that despite everything I should invite them, that I'd regret it if they weren't there. But another part of me, the part that was still super hurt and angry, thought, why should I invite them after how they treated me? In the end, we decided not to send them an invitation. Not to my parents or Stephanie. We sent invitations to everyone else, including aunts, uncles, cousins, family, friends, but not to those three. It was a super difficult decision to make, but I felt it was the right thing at that moment. I didn't want drama at my wedding. I didn't want to be worrying about whether Stephanie was going to make a scene or if my parents were going to be uncomfortable or what have you. Like a week passed after we sent the invitations and my mom called me. I answered because, well, she was still my mom and part of me hoped she was calling to apologize. But no. She asked me if we'd already sent the invitations, and I said yes. And she said, "How strange. We haven't received ours. Could it have gotten lost in the mail?" And I took a deep breath and told her, "It didn't get lost, Mom. We didn't send you an invitation." The silence on the other end of the phone was like 10 full seconds. Then my mom started crying, asked me how I could do this to them, that they were my parents, that I couldn't get married without them there. I explained to her that after everything that happened, how they had made me feel, asking me to postpone my wedding for Stephanie, I felt it was better this way, that I didn't want tension on my special day. My mom told me I was exaggerating, that I was a spoiled and selfish child, that all this was about the money and nothing else. That conversation ended with her hanging up on me. My dad called me like an hour later, calmer than my mom but equally upset. He told me he understood I was angry, but that not inviting them was a low blow, that I was going to regret it, that Stephanie was devastated. Seriously? She was devastated? And that I was destroying the family. I told him I was sorry, but my decision was made. He also ended up hanging up on me. The following days were a roller coaster. My parents called me like 5 more times, sent messages. My mom even went to my workplace, work from home, but I went to the office that day for a meeting, and we had another argument in the parking lot. She apologized to me, but at the same time told me I was being materialistic, that I was choosing money over family, that how was she going to forgive me for this? I told her it wasn't about the money, it was about the lack of respect, about breaking a promise, about asking me to put my life on pause for Stephanie. I decided to take some time to think things through carefully. Matthew told me he'd do whatever I decided, that he supported me unconditionally. I talked to some close friends, to Matthew's family, who by the way were super understanding and supportive, and tried to see the situation from different angles. Was I overreacting? Should I give them another chance? Was I going to regret getting married without them? While I was in that decision-making process, I received a message from Stephanie. We hadn't talked since the fight at my parents' house, and I honestly didn't expect to hear anything from her. The message was long, but it basically said that she wouldn't attend the wedding even if I invited her, that I was an insensitive and cruel person, that I was rubbing my happiness in her face while she suffered, that it was incredible that I couldn't wait just a few months, that she'd always known I was the favorite daughter, that my parents had always given me everything and her nothing, which is literally false, but whatever, and that this situation only confirmed that I was a selfish person who had never cared about her. That message hurt me more than I expected, not because she was right, but because I realized my sister really saw me that way, as an enemy, as someone who was hurting her on purpose. And that made me understand that no matter what I did, Stephanie was going to resent me. If I postponed the wedding, she'd surely find another reason to be upset. If I didn't postpone it, which was what was going to happen, also, there was no way to win. So I decided that if I couldn't win, at least I was going to do what was best for me and Matthew. We confirmed everything for the wedding, didn't send invitations to my parents or Stephanie, and moved forward. The last 2 months before the wedding were stressful but also exciting. Without the constant drama with my family, I could focus on enjoying the process. Matthew's mom practically adopted me, helped me with a ton of things, and even organized my bachelorette party along with my friends. But obviously the drama didn't end there. Like a week before the wedding, Several of my aunts, uncles, and cousins started calling me. It turns out my parents had sent a mass email to the whole family, literally like 40 people, saying that I had disowned them over money, that I was a gold digger who was only marrying Matthew for his money, which is ridiculous. I make my own money perfectly fine. That I had forbidden them from attending my wedding because they hadn't given me the $25,000 and that I was manipulating the whole family against them. When I found out about that email, I almost had an attack. I had to call a bunch of relatives to explain my version of the story. That it wasn't that I had forbidden them to attend, it was that I had decided not to invite them after how they treated me. Some relatives understood me. Others clearly took my parents' side. There were like 5 people who told me they were going to cancel their attendance at the wedding in solidarity with my parents. And honestly, it hurt, but I also thought, if they prefer to believe them without even listening to my side, then I don't want them there either. Finally, the wedding day arrived. I was nervous, obviously, but also incredibly happy. When I was getting ready in the morning with my bridesmaids, there was a moment where I thought about my mom, about how she should be there, helping me with the dress, with the makeup. I cried a little bit. I'm not going to lie. But Matthew's mom came in right at that moment, hugged me, and told me she'd be there with me, that I wasn't alone. And she was right. I wasn't alone. The ceremony was perfect. Matthew cried when he saw me walk toward the altar. E cried too. Obviously. It was super emotional. Our friends and Matthew's family were there, full of love and support. Nobody mentioned my parents. Nobody asked uncomfortable questions. We danced, ate, laughed, and it was honestly the best day of my life. When Matthew gave me the married kiss and everyone applauded, I felt this sense of peace, like I had made the right decision. Now I'm married. We've been married 3 weeks, and tomorrow we're leaving for our honeymoon to Italy, something we could afford because we didn't overspend on the wedding. Ironically. My parents have sent me like 10 messages since the wedding, some apologizing, others complaining, some contradictory where they apologize and attack me at the same time. I haven't answered any of them. Stephanie hasn't said anything either, which is fine. I didn't expect anything from her anyway. I don't know if I'll ever forgive my parents, or if we're going to have a relationship again. Part of me misses what we had before, when things were simpler. But I also realized something important during this whole process, that it's okay to set boundaries, it's okay to prioritize your own happiness, and it's okay to walk away from people who hurt you, even if they're family. Matthew and I are building our own family now, and that's what matters. I guess only time will tell if my parents and I eventually work things out, but for now, I'm at peace with my decision. And that's enough.